far distance. You think people go out west skiing. In the Southeast, people drive from Florida, southern Alabama, the Gulf Coast, the Midwest, the East Coast to go to these resorts because these are the closest ski resorts to them. So if you get a chance to go skiing this season, I'm always a big fan of it. Go up there. So my little tip is don't go on the weekend because the lift lines are crazy. Do a midweek trip. It's sometimes some of the best skiing in the middle of the week. So before I leave tonight, I wanted to focus on one more thing we talked about. I talked about during my newscast, and we talked about on social media today. This has been all over online. So the sun has launched a solar flare early this morning, an X-class solar flare. I think from all the sci-fi movies, people immediately think, uh-oh, this is a bad thing. Yeah, it could be a bad thing in the most dramatic sense. If we have a massive solar flare, it could have major grid problems, satellite disruption. But I'll be honest with you, in modern times, we have a way to forecast and detect these, and we can mitigate some of these factors, even though we have a very interconnected world with cell phones and GPS that can be impacted by this. We have ways to mitigate some of the impacts. The bigger story with this is the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights. People get super excited to see the Northern Lights, and there's a small chance tonight for North Carolina, but probably a better chance tomorrow. You can see the forecast at least, and this is a very fickle forecast because sometimes it doesn't orient correctly, and sometimes, like I think tomorrow could be a problem. It could happen in the middle of the day. And obviously you can't see the Northern Lights in the middle of the day because it's sunlight. But if this does hang on till tomorrow evening, sunset tomorrow night is coming up at 5:18 p.m., we could see the Aurora Borealis in North Carolina again, like we did last October, which is amazing. So just some tips. If we get a chance, it could be early tomorrow morning before sunrise, or again tomorrow evening after sunset. The thing to do is stay tuned for updates. Spaceweather.gov is a great resource. I will post updates, but look for dark locations away from city lights, light pollution, and make sure you head to a location where you can see the northern horizon. And sometimes the best tip, your naked eye, your eye by itself can't see it unaided. Use your camera, use that night camera shot, the long exposure. I know back in October, even in Charlotte, it was tough to see with the naked eye, even though you could, but with your smartphone, you could absolutely see it. So I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this tomorrow on live weather impact as well. But get ready for a warm up. After our cold snap here, we are going to see temperatures jump back into the 60s for tomorrow, and by the end of the week, we'll be in the 70s. But that's it for tonight. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. We're going to have more news coming up on live news impact coming up here on WCNC+. I'll see you later.
Welcome to Live Impact News here on WCNC Plus. I am Julie Kay, getting started right off the top at 7:01 with some news that's happening actively right now. The House Rules Committee at the U.S. Capitol, they are taking up the Senate's proposal to fund the government. We're approaching day 42 of the government shutdown, and really for the last few weeks, we've been talking about the impacts, not just at the federal level, but here locally, of what that means for people to not be getting their paychecks as federal workers, specifically at Charlotte Douglas International Airport, and what that looks like in practice for organizations that provide resources for people who need it. The food bank lines have been incredibly long, and this is all a fight, of course, over health care. The Democrats want to fund Affordable Care Act subsidies that are set to expire. Republicans say that's a fight for a later time. This Senate-funded proposal, this spending package that has already passed the Senate, is now going through House Rules Committee right now, which we're going to get to in a second. This would require a vote on that healthcare subsidy system later on. It does not require that they are funded. So definitely something to pay attention to. A lot of people criticize the Democrats for caving, as some would say. But of course, on the other hand, we've seen the impacts of people without benefits. So we're going to take it live. Just a reminder that this is not the House floor. This is the committee it must pass through to decide how that discussion goes tomorrow. But this is happening live from the U.S. Capitol right now.
Register. How much more can we cut back? Connecticut families brace for soaring health insurance premiums. The Connecticut Public Mirror. For middle-income Connecticut residents, sticker shock looms with ACA health subsidy set to disappear. Channel 3, Connecticut. Richfield couple faces tripling health care costs as cancer survivor needs continued care. That is a reality. And Renee's story is not an outlier. This is going to make life significantly harder for people all across this country, in every state, and yes, in every district. There are some 24 million Americans who get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. The Republican plan puts us on a path to destroying the Affordable Care Act, which, quite frankly, they have been trying to do unsuccessfully for 15 years now. Some of you may not think that health care is related to this continuing resolution, and I beg to differ. Take a look at the authorizing titles in the continuing resolution. There are more than 50 pages worth just dealing with health care. We can solve this problem in this bill if we choose to. And isn't the continuing resolution in the jurisdiction of the Appropriations Committee? You know, the entire House was marginalized in this process. Senate Republicans abruptly called off talks in the middle of negotiations, made their own bills public before reaching an agreement with all four corners. Unprecedented in the modern era. And yet they made the House constitutionally impotent in moving forward. In one of the most egregious examples of something the House was not even aware of before the bills became public, the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee secretly added language in the legislative branch bill from the Senate Majority Leader without the consent of the chair or ranking members of the subcommittee or the full committee. That allows Republican senators to sue the government for their involvement in the January 6th insurrection. And regardless of anyone's opinion on what happened on January 6th, it should be unacceptable to every member of the House that the Senate can secretly add language to a bill without even notifying us. The result, legislative branch bill that includes a provision to give senators who may have participated in the insurrection as much as $1 million payout each, while they excluded a provision to hang a plaque honoring the police officers who put their lives on the line to defend our democracy from that same insurrection. The Military Construction Division excludes $51.7 billion, which was in the House bill, for advanced funding for the Toxic Exposure Fund for 2027. This is a fund that helps victims, I'll wrap up, and victims and Agent Orange get the care they deserve. In our markup in the summer, and the Chair Cole will remember this, Ranking Member Wasserman Schultz, Chair Carter negotiated a compromise to include this funding. The Senate took it out before abandoning negotiations altogether. Simply wrong. We have provided advanced funding for the medical care for veterans for the last 15 years. It's Veterans Day today, and this bill doesn't even meet the funding level that President Trump and OMB Director Vogt restored. The reason why we're here, I have one last point to make. Chairman Cole and I, is because the power of the purse belongs to the Congress. This package fails to protect that authority. Democrats fought to prevent President Trump and OMB director from stealing from our communities, withholding funding that was approved by Democrats and Republicans, blocking the issuing of illegal pocket rescissions, preventing President Trump from unilaterally reneging on any appropriations bill. It does nothing, this package, to address these problems. You can't honestly expect Democrats to go along with any bipartisan funding proposal that can be rescinded with a party line vote, not after trust has been broken in this process. The main reason I oppose this bill is because it does not address the health care crisis that President Trump created, serious concerns with appropriations divisions. I encourage my colleagues to oppose this measure, and I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member DeLauro. Chairman Cole, with respect to the agencies that would operate under a CR, this bill keeps the government running at the same level it's been at since early 2024. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it was President Biden who initially signed these funding levels into law. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
This bill came out of the Senate with bipartisan support, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Chairman, passing this legislation will take away any ambiguity about pay for America's war fighters. It'll bring certainty for SNAP payments. It will guarantee that air traffic controllers, federal law enforcement officers, and other federal workers will receive back pay. Is that correct?
That too is correct.
And there's no other solution on the table that has the bipartisan backing of the Senate. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
So voting against this bill would be a vote to continue that uncertainty to our military SNAP recipients and federal workers. Is that not the case?
That is indeed the case.
One more question. I have been astonished to hear our colleagues say that this Republican health care crisis was manufactured by President Trump. I mean, I'm sure if I asked the clerks to read that back, that's what they say. Would you refresh our memory as to what created the Affordable Care Act, and how did we get here as a result of what happened during COVID? Would you mind doing that? President Trump was not in office in either of those cases. Is that correct?
That too is correct, Madam Chair. You know, I'm trying to limit how much time I use, how outrageous some of the statements I've heard are. The reality is, goes back to a fundamental defect in Obamacare itself, which is constantly, the Affordable Care Act has made health care unaffordable. It's been doing it for 15 years. The basic subsidies are in law. Our friends on the other side during COVID decided we've got a crisis underway. We're going to add a subsidy on top of a subsidy.
The subsidy to what was called the Affordable Care Act, which was never affordable because we taxpayers who pay for our own insurance were subsidizing, correct?
That is absolutely correct. So again, it's a subsidy on top of a subsidy. Our friends added it during COVID. COVID is over. They set a date certain that the subsidies would run out. They chose the date.
And the date certain was?
December 31st of this year. So they chose that date. By the way, they did it without any Republican votes, without any consideration of reforms, without any effort to hold down the price. I mean, they literally are the big insurance companies' best friends. They funneled hundreds of billions of dollars into these things. But again, This is their legislation. They wrote it. They extended it. They added a subsidy to it. And they set the date at which that subsidy was to run out. President Trump certainly wasn't president when either the original legislation was created or this additional subsidy was added. So to blame it on him instead of looking in the mirror and blaming it on yourself is the height of hypocrisy. Yeah, this is a Democratic manufactured crisis that they're blaming on everybody but themselves. And at the same time, well, as they're doing that, they've decided, well, I guess we don't need to pay our men and women in uniform that are defending us. Thank God President Trump twice has pulled rabbits out of a hat and made sure that didn't happen. Or we're not going to pay our air traffic controllers, or our meat inspectors, or our Capitol Police that they celebrate so constantly and rightfully. I mean, come on. This is a totally manufactured crisis by Democrats. They've kept the government shut down. Finally, in the United States Senate, 8 pretty courageous people said, I'm not going to be part of this charade anymore. I'm going to vote to open the government. We can negotiate on these other issues. Majority Leader Thune, our own speaker, made it clear we're willing to do it. We're not going to, by the way, sign off on something that has been an utter disaster. And what the Democrats basically have asked for here is like $1.5 trillion over 10 years in exchange for a 4 or 7 week CR, or now one that will go a little bit longer since they've wasted most of the time. So, I mean, we shouldn't have any doubt about who created the crisis, who's perpetuating the crisis, and who's trying to capitalize on it politically. So I hope that answers your question.
That answers my question very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Yeah, so you just made me think of something, Madam Chair. You said that this is merely an extension of the January 2024 spending bill, that basically it's the same, everything's the same. I think that's what and the Chairman just agreed with that. Does that mean that all the federal workers that were fired have been put back to work?
And under this bill, yeah, people that were let go or rifted. And by the way,
from the beginning of the
you
year,
created, my friend, the crisis that caused that to happen.
I just want to know whether all the people that were fired from the beginning of the year whether or not the cuts in the consumer
there are provisions made to rehire people, but again, let's be clear
Mr.
about
McGovern,
who put
please
people
let
out
him
of
answer.
work.
I can't get my question out, so I will let him answer if he lets me ask the question.
I thought I did. I apologize if I did not.
I want to know whether or not the cuts to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau are restated, or the cuts to NIH, or, I mean, I go right down, all the DOGE cuts. I mean, have they been put back?
The provisions that Democrats asked for in terms of firing in the Senate are in the bill.
No, well, that's not what this, that's not my question.
Hey, look, if you want to be against the bill, that's perfectly fine.
The chairwoman just said that basically this is the same as all the funding that we voted for in January of 2024. I'm just asking you, the stuff that we voted for in January 2024, some of it is no longer there. And some of it, I think, has been illegally cut by the president. Ms. DeLauro, do you want to give me a straight answer to that question?
Absolutely. This is really quite remarkable. Since January until now, and the number may have gone up, over 220,000 federal employees have been let go. They have, most of them let go, some who took a buyout. The other fact of the matter is, it's not the same budget, because and we have a tracker. I can give you documentation that showed you $410 billion that we appropriated. Democrats, Republicans signed into law by the President of the United States. And that money has been terminated, it has been delayed, and it's $410 billion. I'll give you the tracker. It's about 25 or 26 pages. And you can go down and take a look at every appropriations bill, and you can find out what program has been terminated, what's been gone. And that since January has nothing to do with this crisis that the Republicans have initiated and shutting down the government because they don't want to negotiate on health care costs.
So thank you for correcting the record. It's not the same that we voted
No.
for. But in addition to that, was this slush fund for senators who might have been involved with January 6th?
Right, they snuck that in.
Was that in
No, it
January
was not
23rd?
in. It was not in, and I will just say, in all fairness, that was done by the Senate. They snuck it in,
sorry.
and apparently there are 2 violations attached to it. We could be losing about $8 million.
So, Chairman, let me just ask you this question. Do you think the House should have been here these last several weeks trying to pass appropriation bills?
No, we had to wait until the Senate acted on what we sent them.
Right,
It
but-
took the Senate a long time, largely because our Democratic friends used the filibuster, which they claim they oppose, to force us to get to 60 votes.
Well,
We finally did, or they finally did in the Senate. So, no, there wasn't much for us to do
We have 9
until
more
they...
bills, don't we?
Can I finish my
Yeah.
answer? There wasn't anything for us to do until the Senate acted. And the only reason it didn't act more quickly, under their own rules, the filibuster requires them to get to 60, the Democrats withheld their votes. So, I mean, it's Democrats that have kept us out of session. We sent this over in plenty of time. It's not like it was a last-minute emergency thing. I think, as the chairwoman pointed out, we passed this on September the 19th, well ahead of the time, sent it to them, and they couldn't get anything done.
How many
They couldn't get anything done because no
appropriation
Democrats
bills do we?
would cooperate.
How many
I'm
more
sorry.
appropriation bills do we have to pass in the House?
We have passed every one out of committee.
Right.
We have passed over 60% of the funding across the floor. We asked to have additional time. That time has largely been wasted. You know, we in this bill actually passed 3 bills across the floor, if we're able to do that later this week. So we were making actually pretty good progress. The difference is my friends on the other side in the Senate and here decided they would add things to appropriations that are not in our jurisdiction or our expertise. Look, we don't deal with Medicaid. That was actually done in the big beautiful bill. We don't deal with that in Appropriations Committee. We do not deal with subsidies for Obamacare. They're not within our jurisdiction. So you
Right.
added things that were
We're talking about two different
unconnected.
things.
Can I finish my answer? You were
With the
added things that were unconnected to appropriations, and then were shocked when they weren't dealt with in appropriations bill. They belong somewhere else. It's my understanding both the Speaker and the Majority Leader, and frankly the President, have said, we'll negotiate with you when you reopen the government, but we're not going to sit here and negotiate after you shut down the government and threaten us. Nobody does that. You didn't do that
Mr.
when
Luro,
these
maybe you
roles
can
were
answer the
Let me
question.
just say that-
How many appropriation bills? have
9
we-
are left to go.
have we-
9 are left to go.
We
Nine.
We could have done them during.
Well, they're in the committee, but they haven't been to the floor.
Answer
just asked
without
a question.
any interruption. We've
you
passed
just
every
interrupted
one
her.
across the out of committee. We've passed 3 across the floor. They collectively add up to over 60%. By the way, a far better record than the Democrats in the Senate had last year when they were in control. They didn't pass a single appropriations bill out. So, yeah, we're moving
Well,
pretty
listen, we
well.
have 9 bills to go.
Let me just ask.
We have nine, but-
The question, I just want to make sure, the question I asked that doesn't get answered is, how many do we have left to do on
We
the
have
floor?
9 bills to
And
do
could we
across the floor.
I'm
That
talking to Mr.
that are
Luro.
about 40% of federal spending.
Madam Chair, I mean, I'm asking Mr. Luro a question, and we can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was
no.
directed to me. I
mean, guess,
apologize.
Yeah, and I just want to know, the question I asked Mr. Cole, which he didn't want to answer, but I'll ask you, couldn't we have been doing stuff on the floor these
Absolutely.
last 8 weeks?
Absolutely. There has been so much wasted time, even in the process of the appropriations bills. And we did pass them in committee. And hours and hours and hours about poison pill riders that were done. These were unilaterally partisan.
You've been listening in to the House Rules Committee discussing the Senate proposed and passed spending bill that is going to likely be on the House floor for a vote tomorrow. This would end the government shutdown, at least for now. However, it has to go through House rules first, and it seems like this is going to be going on for quite a while as House representatives are actively discussing this, and it doesn't seem like there's really any headway made yet. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Julie Kay here, and we're going to get right back out to that House Rules Committee meeting where they are working towards ending this government shutdown. Now, the longest in U.S. history, 42 days almost in, but this Senate spending bill would be ending that if House Rules figures out how this is going to go tomorrow when the House floor gets a chance to vote on it. So let's take a listen in. Remember, this is happening live, so we don't know where this is going or how long this is going to take.
My letter, and my monthly cost has gone from $1,287 to $3,026 for the next year. As a working family with a daughter who has an autoimmune disease, we're struggling. I'm working 50-plus hours just to pay the insurance. Another person, if I continue on the same plan I am on now, it will be 2.5 times more and be unaffordable. $15,000 plus a month is incredulous for one person's health premium. When I calculate my net income, not gross, it is beyond sustainable. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I know, but how do we reconcile the priorities that give us, tax cuts for people who are well off, but when it comes to health care, and we can argue about whether the system can be better, I would prefer a different system. I would prefer Medicare for all. We've done it. We did a hearing when I was the chairman of the Rules Committee on that, and it was a very good hearing. But nonetheless, this is an immediate crisis. And I think people can't understand is how you can find in a nanosecond the money for tax cuts for people who are well off, but we can't find a way to just help middle-class working families get through this really difficult time. I mean, yeah, I mean.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Well, the most immediate crisis in my district are the thousands of workers that you and your colleagues have put out of work that aren't getting a paycheck. That's the calls I get. I have thousands of them. They're the ones that keep the airplanes flying. They're the ones that do the National Weather Center.
No
they're
calls on
wondering
healthcare?
why they're not getting paid.
So you get no
when
calls
there
on
was legislation. We could have had these debates. We could have had these arguments. Why are they being held hostage? Why are you not willing to pay them? That's the calls I get.
So nobody calls you on
Why is the government
healthcare?
shutting down? Why do men and women in uniform who are deployed have to wonder whether or not their family at home is going to get a paycheck? That's on you. Look, this is the stuff you said you would never do.
So the 48
We would never shut down the government. We would never do
So
that.
of-
That's exactly what
of the
you've
fo-
done.
so of the 40
you're putting thousands of people out of work.
of the 48,000
health care issue you're talking about
no-
is a subsidy that you passed on your own on top of other subsidies you said was COVID-related. You said it would run out. We've said, okay, let's sit down and talk about fundamental changes here. But no, it's like we have to have our way. We have to have a guaranteed spending of $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years to exchange for you to pay people for 4 weeks in your original proposal.
So
We actually asked for 7.
You've tried over 50 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
The most
Right.
immediate crisis in my
come
project
on,
you've
Tom.
created.
Well,
My people
so-
aren't getting paid
so no-
thanks to you and your colleagues.
So nobody in your district is complaining
I
to you
didn't
about the
say,
health care?
hey, people complain everywhere about everything.
we have a chance to do something about
But you asked me
that.
what the most important calls I get is, why am I not getting paid?
And we have a chance to do something
Why am I
about
being forcibly
this.
furloughed? There's important work for me to do.
Here's the thing, we have a chance to do something to help millions of people afford their health insurance, and what you're all telling me is you're not interested.
I thought that we had affordable health care.
We-
No,
we
I am
did.
interested.
When you
I have a
when you guys
whole
ex-
series of them.
when you guys
But they
ex-
have nothing to do with
When-
appropriations
you got-
bill. They have nothing to do with the work of my committee. We
You-
do not do that at my
You
committee.
all extended.
But you're
you all
willing to
voted
hijack our
You all
committee.
voted to extend tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, make them permanent, but you could not extend these
you got-
for people. Mr. Laurel.
I'm just going to say you got 13 members, 13 Republican members of the House who have said allowing the tax credits to lapse without a clear path forward, there is no clear path forward, would risk harm to those we represent. These are 13 members of the Republican conference who are scared to death that that's what's going to happen in their districts. You've got, and in the chairman's district, a 60-year-old couple that makes $82,000 is going to see insurance premiums rise by $17,000 unless the Congress prevents it. Now, if that's okay, and you've got other members in the same situation, we can go down district by district and let you know what it is that is out there for this. And members who serve on the Appropriations Committee as well.
All
And it is-
13 of those members voted to pay people.
Yeah.
They voted to keep the government open.
Well,
None of you did, except for one member in Maine who's now retiring because he's
You
being
control,
beaten up so
the
badly
House and the
for
Senate.
paying
and everything.
people.
Madam Chair,
Exactly.
with all due respect.
Right.
When we debated the ACA, you controlled over an hour at a time. And you want to cut me off, that's fine. My constituents are getting screwed by what is happening here in this Congress or what is not happening in this Congress.
And every member-
they send me
members
here to
effort.
fight for them because they're going to lose their health care or they're not going to be able to afford their health care. This is a big deal. And the indifference on this shown by the Republican majority in this House and by the guy in the White House who's remodeling bathrooms and building,
$40 billion
Taj
to
Mahal.
Argentina.
I mean, it is ridiculous. But I'm just saying, I want to point for the historical record. I'm not getting the same courtesy that the chairwoman received when we did the ACA.
Just
And I-
listen to the American people. Last Tuesday, they made their voices heard on these issues. And you ought to take heed with what happened last Tuesday.
Mr. McGovern, what Mr. Cole has pointed out, and I've pointed out, and others have pointed out, this was put in place by the Democrats. The cutoff of the subsidies was put in place by you, and I think we have debated this point.
Why?
Ms. Fishbach,
Oh, I knew, okay. Well,
Ms. Fishbach, you're
It's
recognized.
useless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just, before I go any further, I just want to recognize, I think you mentioned, it is Veterans Day, so I want to wish all of the veterans
Right.
happy Veterans Day.
We should pass the,
And all of us, I
Advance
think.
funding.
I'm speaking.
I know
Okay.
you are.
But I think
Thank you
that,
very much.
all of us probably to be here had to miss events that we were going to be at. And so I just wanted to say thank you for being here. and sorry that we couldn't attend those veterans events to commemorate Veterans Day for them. So just for that, but I am, as the discussion goes on, am amazed at this because this Democrat shutdown is all over a simple, clean, continuing resolution.
Not clean.
6 weeks. 6 weeks
Not
clean.
clean.
Well, the Democrat alternative, ma'am, was $1.5 trillion worth of spending. So this was a clean 6-week CR. We could have had all of those discussions you're so concerned about.
Not
We
clean.
could have been doing that. And the simple fact is, there was a vote on September 19th. If you voted yes, you voted yes to keep government open. You voted yes to pay people. You voted yes to keep things moving along. You voted yes to continue the appropriations. If you voted no, which the Democrats, with the exception of one, voted no,
voted yes.
that shut down government.
You voted yes
So,
to allow it to be
ma'am,
money
ma'am.
was stolen.
Ma'am, I am speaking.
I hear you.
Okay. And I just wanted to say, there's questions about whether or not we were working, and with all due respect,
You're not working.
you were looking in the wrong place, because all of us were working. I was in DC. You looked in the wrong place. I was meeting with constituents. I was in my district part of the time, meeting with constituents. So to imply that we were on a vacation is ridiculous. It's just ludicrous, because our constituents know we were working. I mean, my staff, I came, met with constituents here, met with constituents in the district, and I think pretty much every single one of the Republicans did. And so I find it just ridiculous, and those kinds of statements are just pure not accurate. I'll say it that way. But Mr. Cole, Chair Cole, has pointed out that the appropriations process is so incredibly important. It is the way we should be doing things. The Appropriations Committee was doing it. Just needed 6 more weeks on that clean CR so that we could continue to do it. We're going to pass the 3 that are going to be on this bill. We have some more. We're going to continue to do that. But that's the way things should be happening here. It is absolutely, it's regular order. We should be doing it. And I just had a couple of questions just for clarification for Mr. Cole. And so does this bill provide funding for SNAP?
Yes, it does.
Did the bill that we voted on September 19th provide funding
Yes,
for
it
SNAP?
did.
Yes. So if we had voted way back in September 19th, we would have taken care of that. So,
Worth noting,
Lack
too,
of
a majority
understanding.
of both houses voted for that. 55 senators
Yep.
voted for that, and obviously a majority in this body because it passed here. So it's just simply a Senate rule that's been perverted and taken advantage of. A majority of Congress has voted consistently to keep the government open while these other issues can be dealt with. It's Democrats that decided to shut the government down.
and like I pointed out, simple fact, September 19th, you can check the record. Who voted yes, who voted no? Yes to keep the government open. And I've pointed that out repeatedly over the last few weeks, while we've been shut down, because it's a simple fact. It's not the rhetoric, it just, you can prove it by checking the record. And Mr. Cole, I was going to ask you about if both of those bills, so the September 19th bill would have paid the troops. The September 19th bill would have kept the government open. The September 19th bill would have kept the funding for veterans. And so we had that, and they chose to shut the government down. So, but, and so this bill is going to reopen. We're going to get our troops paid. We're going to get the Capitol Police paid. We're going to do what we need to. We're going to get back pay. We're going to, for the federal workers, and we are going to make sure that folks get their SNAP benefits. And so I appreciate that this has come forward, and so I would ask the other side to join us in opening the government back up, so then we can have these discussions that you've been so concerned about, that you want to make sure it gets done. And I don't think that the proposals that you have actually solve the issue of increased health care insurance. It doesn't do it. We need to have more in-depth discussions about what's really going on about it. And so please join us in opening the government, and with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Ms. Scanlon for her time of questioning.
Thank you. I would first yield to Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, we are happy to join with you. We want the government open. We just don't want millions of people to get screwed over on their health care. insurance. So if you join with us, this is a crisis, by the way, that's right now. It's not 3 months from now or 6 months from now.
Right.
It's right now. People have gotten their bills. People are making decisions whether they're going to forego their health care. So that is it. And the idea that we can't get well, there are 13 Republicans that at least have said that they support us on extending the benefits. We'll see whether, they did it for show or whether it's for real. But I think if you let the House work its will, I think a majority of Democrats or Republicans would vote to extend that tax credit. And millions of people won't lose their health care, won't get screwed over because of the indifference and the inaction of this Congress. You found it, you found the time, you found it acceptable to extend the expiring tax cuts for multimillionaires and billionaires, but you couldn't find it within your heart to extend this. So we're happy to join with you, but join with us too. If you want our votes, then, we want to help working people afford their health insurance. I yield back to Ms. Scanlon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. As we're convening here for the first time in months, our nation's healthcare system is buckling under the combined attacks of over almost $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid that were rammed through in the big ugly bill this summer, the White House's unilateral cuts to congressionally approved spending for NIH, medical research, including pediatric cancer, and now the Republican refusal to extend the ACA tax credits that help millions of Americans afford their health insurance. And they're already seeing these health insurance premiums go up. As Mr. McGovern said, this is not something that can wait because families are enrolling now for next year. And the Republicans have refused to address this issue all year, not just since the shutdown occurred. They've refused to address it at all. And none of this is an accident. It's all by choice. Just like it was a choice by President Trump to defund SNAP benefits this month for the first time in history. For more than 60 years, through recessions, natural disasters, and even previous shutdowns, and including previous shutdowns under this president, the federal government has never missed a SNAP payment until now. And why? Because President Trump and congressional Republicans will pick their billionaire buddies over American families every damn time. So once again, with this bill, they're choosing to let health care premiums skyrocket and causing families to lose coverage. Look, there have been 2 big tax provisions set to expire this year, and they've taken up a lot of attention. One was tax cuts for billionaires, and the second was tax credits for American families. This summer, Speaker Johnson called us back to D.C. when we were supposed to be home for the 4th of July weekend because it was an emergency to pass this big ugly bill which extended tax cuts for billionaires. But when it came time to extend tax credits for millions of Americans to help them afford health care, Speaker Johnson sent the House home for almost 2 months. And he won't commit to having a vote on those health care credits even after the government reopens. And again, that's a choice. For the last 42 days, while the Speaker has made clear that he has no interest in negotiating with Democrats to produce a bill capable of passing both houses, his job isn't just one house. It has to be able to pass both houses. While he's been refusing to do anything, the White House has been working overtime to use the shutdown to inflict as much pain as possible on the American people, particularly the most vulnerable of our neighbors. And again, that's a choice. The White House chose to try to fire more than 4,000 federal workers. That's a choice. The White House has threatened to withhold back pay to federal workers despite a 2019 bill that would prevent that. That's a choice. This White House chose to withhold SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans. It has pressured states not to advance those benefits. It has threatened grocers with penalties if they offer discounts to struggling SNAP beneficiaries. It has defied court orders to fund SNAP benefits, and it has appealed every one of those decisions every step of the way. Those are all choices, and again, never before has an administration blocked SNAP benefits. They have always tried to make sure those go out because the funding, in fact, is available. But this is what happens when governing becomes a game. And games are exactly what this Trump administration has played with SNAP and with the American people during the shutdown. Millions of families have spent a couple weeks struggling to feed their kids because of this White House's deliberate choices. The human cost of this Republican shutdown and this budget proposal are staggering. And behind every number are kids and veterans and seniors all across America who are going to pay for these choices. Ranking Member DeLauro, I had a couple questions for you. First of all,
You've been listening in to the House Rules Committee discussing what next steps look like to end the government shutdown. Again, we are approaching day 42, and this is still going to take some time. Of course, the Senate has passed a bill. House Rules has to discuss how that discussion is going to go on the House floor tomorrow before they can come to a vote as well on that spending deal. We're going to come back out to this because it is still, I imagine, going to be going on pretty much all night here. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Live Impact News. We're getting straight back out to the House Rules Committee. Reminder, this is a necessary step on that Senate bill for spending at the government level to end the shutdown. This is what they're discussing right now before it gets to the House floor tomorrow.
Where we had money for SNAP, which is mandatory funding. We then do a contingency fund there, and the president, actually President Trump, he signed a bill into law in March, which provided for $3 billion for the contingency fund. Biden had done it, before, so there's $6 billion in a contingency for an emergency. So to say that the government had to open before those is really misinformation, and quite frankly, it's a lie. It's a lie. But in the bill that's there, the agriculture bill, there is the money for SNAP, and yes, there's a $6 billion contingency fund.
okay. Whenever we have a big bill like this, there are things that crop up in it, and one of the corrupt Easter eggs in the text of this bill is that it would allow certain senators to get payments from the federal government because a special prosecutor got a warrant that allowed the special prosecutor to investigate whether or not they participated in illegal efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Is that an appropriate use?
Well, first of all, it doesn't
appropriation
belong.
funds?
Speaking of things that don't belong in an appropriations bill, this certainly doesn't. But as I mentioned in my remarks, that this is really egregious. This was the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee saying, taking the word of the majority leader and putting this piece in the bill without anyone knowing about it. Leadership, I didn't know about it, and I would just say my colleague, the chairman of the House Committee, didn't know about it. And the issue here is what the results of that is to allow, there's 7 or 8 people involved here that, and again, whether or not you believe what happened on January 6th, my God, how the heck can we just airdrop this stuff in the bill with no one knowing about it? But the price tag is potentially $8 million to pay off senators.
Okay. Look, I think the American people are smart enough to know who's fighting for them and who's fighting to line their own pockets and those of billionaires. This is a bad deal. It fails to extend the ACA premium tax credits. It fails to guarantee a vote to address the Republican healthcare crisis. It even fails to guarantee that states are reimbursed for stepping up and providing SNAP benefits that have been illegally blocked by this administration. We need a budget that protects all Americans. That's what governing and leadership is supposed to be about, and that's what Americans deserve. So I can't in good faith support this deal to reopen the government because it doesn't meet those basic standards. And I would yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
Thank my friend from Virginia. Good to see everybody back. Good to see you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. A couple things. There's been a lot of conversations here about the federal employees. Real quick question for the Ranking Member. How many employees would depart through attrition, whether it was under Biden or President Trump?
Yeah, well, overall, we've got, that's almost, I think it's now over 220,000 federal employees that were either fired, some took the voluntary buyout, which maybe is what you're talking about with the attrition piece, but over 220,000 federal employees. That started in January. It has nothing to do with a government shutting down and people furloughed, et cetera. These people were gone in a nanosecond here.
So question to Mr. Chairman, what I was getting at here is, for whatever the numbers are, 220,000 or variants, Mr. Chairman, would you agree that a very large number of those go every year by attrition, say over 100,000, that there was in fact this deferred program, right, where they were basically offered the ability to leave, which represents another large chunk, I don't know, 60 or 70,000 or some significant number. And then there are questions then of additional employees, whether it's RIFs and so forth. And in the question of the RIFs from October, which are post-shutdown, post-Democrat caused shutdown, that those RIFs are reinstated under this legislation, correct? To the ones post-shutdown, is that correct?
That's correct.
And all of the prior folks, we're talking about the vast majority are those that are either left through attrition or those who went out under the deferred program. Is that true?
That's correct.
So I think a lot is being made of that, and I think then the question becomes, well, what is the right number of employees, right? I mean, so you've got people who are leaving under attrition, you have people who were then, they took a deferred program, they left, and the administration is trying to act, and then with respect to the RIFs and the decisions they were making in October, is that not the prioritization authority that the administration has during a shutdown to manage what they've got to on a cash flow basis to manage the functions of government?
I think that's correct. Let me add one thing, just an interesting wrinkle on this, and I just speak for my own district. We had people that wanted to take the buyout,
right,
that they literally, the government said, no, we're not going to, you're not going to be able to because you're mission critical. I mean, over 1,000 at Tinker Air Force Base wanted to take the buyout, but they were too important to keeping bombers in the air, tankers in the air, AWACS in the air. And the decision was made locally by the commanding general. No, we can't afford to lose you. I mean, you can leave, obviously. Any Americans can resign their position, but we can't give you a buyout. We really need you here. So, yeah, I mean, these numbers are a lot more complex than simple, which I think is the point you're making, than just stating a number, saying these people are all driven out. That's just not the case.
Well, and importantly, I think if you go from that to then the second area of concern, which we're talking about with respect to just the shutdown generally, true or false, on September 19th, we passed legislation that would have continued funding at current levels through November 20th.
That's true.
And on October 1st, the government entered shutdown because the Senate, by virtue of decisions by Senate Democrats, refused to take up and pass that bill, which undeniably would have continued to fund government at the current level beginning October 1 through November 20th. And instead, we entered a shutdown.
That's correct, although I always think it's important to note 55 senators, majority of the Senate,
Correct,
did actually vote to keep the government open.
And so important for the American people to understand that was a choice. And so I think when we talk about a shutdown, the question is why? Why? Why do it? Because here we are, and we've got legislation in front of us that Democrats have now supported in the Senate that return us effectively to the status quo ante, where we're going to have government funded out to another now date certain, now extended into January, because we're now into November, so we had to extend the date. We managed to move 3 appropriations bills through some degree of regular order, 3 bills in the House and the Senate. But by virtue of now passing this bill, we're going to restore where we would have been had we just done our work on October 1. So the question is, what was the last 45 days all about? Could it have been potentially the intervening political elections? Could that possibly have been the cynical motivations of the, not right now, I won't.
I was going to ask you a question.
Could it have possibly been the cynical motivations of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle? Just a rhetorical question that I'll leave floating out there to say, what were the reasons? We know why. Because our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have nothing to run on. And our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want something desperately to run on, so they're trying to manufacture a health care crisis that they created. That's the actual truth. And with respect to health care, the question that I would ask is this: should we be putting forward legislation that will continue to fund the insurance companies at the level they're currently getting, where 85% of their revenues are coming from the federal government? Because that's what's happening. Or that $35 billion are going to insurance companies last year to go to the people that weren't even using their plans. Is that what we should be doing? Is that the healthcare system that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are saying that must be addressed by virtue of subsidies to insurance companies? Because President Trump had it right last week when he said, well, if you're going to do these subsidies, which is not how we would prefer to do business, then shouldn't it go to the American people to be able to go into a market and go be able to get the doctor of his or her choice, or get direct primary care, or be able to figure out how to take care of their family rather than call an insurance bureaucrat who's pocketing the money through a system that our colleagues designed and broke, and for which not one single Republican ever voted, including the subsidies that no Republican voted for, that were created to be temporary by our colleagues' own voice. They were to be temporary during COVID. And we are now to extend the very subsidies that my colleagues are laying bare, the broken healthcare system that they created. I remember all too well in 2013 being on the floor of the Senate with Ted Cruz when we were raising the questions of what would happen when this system were implemented. Because the debate then was whether we should fund the implementation of a system that would end up bankrupting the average American family, as this system has done.
You shut down,
What I'm talking about is the reason. I'm talking about the reason that one would go to the Senate floor and say maybe we shouldn't do the very thing that right now is causing the American people pain.
15 years.
Because we talk about the constituents who are having pain. Yeah. How about my constituent who died last year, who couldn't go to MD Anderson because Obamacare doesn't cover it? Is that coverage? Is that the kind of health care system that people deserve? While insurance companies are pocketing extraordinary profits, off the charts
15 years
profits.
and you haven't come up with a plan for health insurance.
And health insurance,
15 years.
Health insurance executives are minting money.
Oh, God.
Minting money on the back of dollars coming from federal taxpayers and the federal government. And then our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have the temerity to come here and complain about the system they broke. That's what we're
Care
actually
Act.
dealing with here.
It's about repeal of the Affordable Care Act. That's what this is all about.
Or the extent to which you've got
With no
the,
replacement.
is it our time? The extent to which we are here because our colleagues know full well that this was a political exercise. To the chairman, we heard about SNAP. True or false, if we pass this legislation, will SNAP benefits proceed immediately?
Correct.
They could proceed.
So if we pass this
now.
legislation tomorrow,
Now.
Yeah,
SNAP funding will continue immediately.
correct.
While our friends at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue are trying to manage the funding of government, while our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have shut it down,
They're at the
correct?
Supreme Court
Correct.
trying to end that. Big,
Mr.
beautiful
Chairman,
bill.
one last question. So our colleague brought up the big, beautiful bill. When we created and set out the big, beautiful bill, and we put into it components to deal with border security and defense, where we had $150 billion for each in that legislation, was that not beneficial for the executive branch to manage through such a moment as this, where our colleagues have shut down the government and they've now had additional flexibility with respect to dollars? Not all, it's not appropriations, I realize that, but they had additional flexibility to manage through it so that we could continue to secure the border and secure to defend the nation.
I wouldn't presume to speak for the administration, but that would be my opinion, that has given them the ability to make sure that we've been able to pay our troops twice, which would not have happened had they not had that flexibility and the president not made some tough decisions. So, yeah, I point out, I know everybody here is concerned about SNAP and WIC, and the president directed additional resources into those programs to the extent that he could during a government shutdown. So, I mean, the president's done everything he can to mitigate, I think, what our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have done. They haven't been able to do it in the House. I do stress this is a Senate deal. It's been the minority position in both chambers. But I appreciate what the administration's done to try and make sure the people that needed help got it, the people that deserved to get paid did get paid insofar as they could do it. But, yeah, again, they can't do it indefinitely, and they can't do it for everyone.
Mr. Roy?
I think, Chairman, one last point that I want for the record. The Obamacare 2026 premiums, there's a great report that puts out that shows that only 3.3% of those premiums are affected at all by the COVID credits, that 97% of the premiums in 2026 will continue to flow as normal, and I'd like to insert that in the record. Thank you.
Mr.
Yield
Roy?
back.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Roy?
Roy. Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you. I just have to start. Chairman Cole, I have a number of probing questions, but before I ask you some questions, I have to address some of the comments made by the gentleman from Texas. I'm just going to read a quote. And I do this because I actually don't think I could find a quote like this from Chairman Cole. So in some respects, although I disagree with much of his testimony, but he certainly has more clean hands than some of my other colleagues. Quote, "Let's not fund a government that's going to be exacting tyranny over our American brothers and sisters." Full length of the interview is available here, and some key quotes are below. This is from the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy's website, November of 2021. Should any Republican vote to fund an executive branch? In other words, should Article 1, Congress, which has the power of the purse, as the founders gave us, should we give any dollars to the executive branch for President Biden to issue unconstitutional and unlawful mandates that are causing people to have to choose between their livelihoods and getting a vaccine which they don't want? Let's stand united. Let's not do what these 13 Republicans did last Friday and go side with Nancy Pelosi. Let's not fund a government that's going to be exacting tyranny over our American brothers and sisters. This is from Mr. Roy. Spare me. Hold on. No, Mr. Roy, it's my time. It's my time. You certainly made that clear with the chairwoman. Spare us. Mr. Cole, perhaps, I think, as I said, can have some clean hands to talk to us about this particular set of circumstances we find ourselves in. You cannot. There might be other colleagues of yours, I think, who might share Mr. Cole's worldview, but I don't know. I thought I've heard everything in Congress, but to hear my colleague from Texas, his indignation about the government shutdown as he instigated and tried to instigate shutdown after shutdown, just 3 years ago, 4 years ago. This isn't distant memory. In any event, I digress. Mr. Cole, how many days has the House of Representatives been in session since August 3rd?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
12 days sound about right?
Something like that.
I can represent to you that the House, since August 3rd, has been in session for a total of 12 days. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Bannon. I suspect you are. Yes?
Never met him.
Never met him. You know of him.
If you read the newspapers, you know of him.
Yeah, I don't. It's not a trick question. You know Steve Bannon exists.
No,
all right.
sir, I know who he is.
Okay, there was a report recently where Steve Bannon compared the U.S. Congress under Speaker Johnson to the Duma, allegedly. You think that's an apt comparison?
No, I don't.
No. Would it surprise you to know that the Duma has been in session longer this fall than the United States House of Representatives?
I don't know that the Duma's sessions make very much difference.
Well, I'm not so sure they make much difference here, given the way in which Republicans are capitulating to every demand that President Trump makes. I think it is shameful that the House has been in session for 12 days since August 3rd. 54 days out of session. You cannot possibly, Chairman, you've been in Congress for some time. You can't possibly defend a 54-day recess, the second longest recess in the modern history of the Congress. You would defend that?
You should probably direct that sentiment toward the United States Senate.
The Senate decides when the House is in session?
No, if you'll let me finish my
Well,
my
no,
point.
because I don't.
My point is, we sent a bill in plenty of time over to the Senate to keep the government open functioning. All these other issues you're concerned about could be addressed, could be debated.
Why not pass these
decide
bills?
Whatever.
Why not consider the bills on the floor? The approach
We're
bills.
waiting for the Senate to get back.
Why wait?
The Senate has now finally acted.
Okay, Mr. Cole,
Wasn't the Republicans that kept it from acting?
I understand. You
Okay,
said that
that's
in
my
response
concern.
to Mr. McGovern. My question is, and this was what I think he was trying to glean from both you and the ranking member, there are plenty of appropriation bills that were passed out of committee. The House could have met the last week of September, any week in October, last week, yesterday, any time over the last 54 days. The House could be convened to consider these appropriation bills. John Thune doesn't get to decide when the House of Representatives is in session. Mike Johnson does. And I'm trying to understand from you why you've decided to take this position
I
that
don't
essentially...
make these decisions.
I'll finish and then I'll let you answer.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Why you've
I thought
taken
you
this
had.
position that the House should effectively stay out of session. I mean, I guess this is your position, that if the government is shut down, the House of Representatives should not convene. Is that your position?
If we can open it by ourselves, which we had done.
Sure.
We had passed legislation, clean legislation, to keep the government open.
You've said that.
It went to the United States Senate, and you wait until they send you something back.
And do nothing else. That's
What?
my point. Do you know how many bills have passed out of committee this year that are sitting downstairs at the floor, the desk in the House? 150. 150 bills that have passed. Many of your colleagues here on the Republican side of the aisle, they have passed bills out of committee, along with bills that I've passed on veterans' health care, on issues of foreign policy, you name it. The House has refused to consider any of those for the last 54 days. I'm trying to understand why. Why not just say to the Speaker in October, you know what?
Call us back.
Speaker Johnson, it's time to bring the House back. We'll wait. You know, the Senate, you're right. The Senate's considering the bills that we sent them. They're considering the CR that you mentioned, right? That you've made clear. You passed it. I get it. But while we're waiting, maybe we ought to consider other matters, including the appropriation bills that you are so proud of that you moved out of your committee?
I am proud of them. I would be much happier if the Senate would just open the government
But you don't
and
have
we
to
can
wait for
proceed.
them. I don't
actually-
understand.
look,
I mean, honestly, I think I've got an answer to that question. I think you've answered it. And I
Okay.
think the answer is effectively that John Thune is in charge of the House calendar from here on out. That basically the position is, I mean, Mike Johnson has given his gavel. I thought he gave, I didn't ask a question, Mr. Cole.
I'm sorry. I thought you did.
I thought Mr. Speaker Johnson had given his gavel to the president. But it appears as though, at least based on your answers, that he gave it to Senator Thune. Because there is no excuse for the Speaker's decision to keep us out of session for 54 days. And by the way, this
is no excuse for the government to be shut down.
Mr.
You
Cole,
and your colleagues
that
have
wasn't a
voted for that
question. I'll ask you.
repeatedly.
I'm happy to ask you a question. Because it seems like you are very comfortable with the House being out of session for extended periods of time. Is that a fair?
I am comfortable doing my job, and I've been here quite a bit, my friend.
I understand.
And working on these issues, quite frankly. But we didn't vote to shut down the government in the House.
Okay, you mentioned you've been here a long
And to be
time.
fair, my Senate colleagues didn't vote to shut down the government, and
Got
a
it.
majority of the
Got it.
United States
You've
Senate,
made that
including
position clear.
members from your party.
You've made your
did not
position
vote.
clear, Mr.
So
Cole.
I think the people that shut down the government
You said
can take
you've made your
responsibility
position
for
clear.
shutting down
As
the
you
government.
said, you've been here a lot longer than I have, and that's certainly true. I haven't been here for long. I found an article. This is from 2007. You've been in Congress for some time. The headline, Cole, quote, "Now is not the time for a vacation," end quote. This is when Democrats had the majority in 2007. Congress must work through Memorial Day recess to produce a clean funding bill. U.S. Congressman Tom Cole today joined nearly every member of the Republican conference in sending a letter to then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, calling her to keep the House in session until Congress sends then President Bush a clean funding bill that he will sign into law. This was effectively, I'll just say, the letter was sent to Speaker Pelosi 8 days before Congress is scheduled to adjourn for the Memorial Day recess. Legislative business is not scheduled to resume until June 5th. I mean, you all were clamoring, demanding that the Speaker reconvene the House and not take a 10-day recess. And now what? We're in week 8 and we're finally here? And you won't say a word of criticism about the Speaker's strategy in keeping all of us?
I reserve my criticism for the people that shut down the government of the United States.
I
and
think
have
it is
kept it
rich.
shut down for 40-odd days.
I think
and
it
have
is-
made sure recipients didn't get it. I've
I
made
think
sure
it's
people
rich.
didn't get paid.
Mr.
That's who
Chairman,
I'll
I think it's
criticize.
rich. Again, I would just simply say that if the shoe were on the other foot, I don't think, honestly, I don't think you would hesitate, to call the Speaker's actions disgraceful, to keep us out of session for 54
No,
days. But in any event, that's fine. Let's talk about the last 54 days. So the Speaker, he said something that was fascinating. I thought it was a really interesting quote. If I can find it. Here we go. Yeah, that was interesting. So the quote is, "House Republicans are doing some of the most meaningful work of their careers. They are in their districts. I don't want to pull them away from that." You agree with the Speaker's comments?
I don't speak for the Speaker, but I don't disagree with him. Look, we're waiting for the
No,
Senate
that's
to
not the
do its
question.
job.
That's not the question. You
No,
answered it. You answered it.
I don't
Okay, so Chairman,
disagree with the
it
Speaker.
sounds like you're saying that you agree that with the Speaker. Republican members were doing some of the most, quote, meaningful work of their careers during that 54 days. I assume you were here in Washington and back in Oklahoma,
Yeah,
right? Did you have any in-person town halls?
no.
None. 54 days?
Did several teletown halls.
Teletown halls. But you've done in-person town halls before. I know that to be true. Why not? 54 days is a long time. Not one town hall?
Nope.
Did you visit any of the federal facilities?
Oh, I
in
visited
your
federal
district?
facilities. I've done multiple meetings with chambers of commerce, Rotary clubs. It's been highly visible.
I don't know if you heard my colleague, Ms. Fishbach. She took great umbrage at this notion that, that Republicans were somehow on vacation.
All right, they are still going there at the House Rules Committee. They need to come to some sort of consensus tonight for this to make it to the House floor tomorrow and end the government shutdown. But as you can see, lots of disagreement on both sides. So we're going to take a quick break and check back in when we get back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Live Impact News. It is 8:12 here, and the House Rules Committee is still going, approaching 2 hours of this committee being live and discussing this potential deal for a government shutdown solution, but has to get through this committee before it gets to the House floor tomorrow. So we're going to keep an eye on this and see if they come to any resolution here.
Well, there's an amendment that will be introduced
Well,
that
I'm
I'm
not
not
a
asking you a
member of
question.
this
Mr. Chairman,
committee.
not asking you a question. Let me finish my statement,
I'm sorry.
and then you'll have an
I
opportunity.
apologize.
There will be an amendment proposed to remove what I think is a deeply insidious provision. I think it is outrageous for these Republican senators to effectively guarantee themselves
$1 million?
million-dollar paydays. Retroactive provision in this bill that very clearly applies to them. The removal of all relevant immunity defenses on the part of the United States government. This is insanity to allow this provision to go forward. And I would hope that my Republican colleagues would join us in supporting the removal of this provision. At a minimum, we ought to be able to find common ground on that. So with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. Mr. Langworthy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I, like all of you, are here in Washington today instead of celebrating the incredible veterans in our district and across the country. But as members of the Rules Committee, we begin the important process here in the House that will finally end this shutdown madness. I honor the veterans every day, and especially today. But the work we're doing here tonight and starting that work, and we'll finish tomorrow, will begin to end the turmoil that has made their lives and the lives of millions of Americans harder for more than 40 days. For over 40 days, the American people have endured a completely unnecessary and entirely avoidable government shutdown. Not because Congress couldn't find common ground, but because Senator Schumer and his allies turned governing into political theater. And you've heard a lot of political theater already here tonight. You've chosen performance over duty and outrage over outcomes. From day one, the House did its job. we passed a clean continuing resolution, a straightforward measure to keep the government open while the appropriations process continued. And I think Chairman Cole has really articulated that very well here tonight. It's the same kind of measure that Congress passed repeatedly in the Biden years. I voted for every one of those CRs, despite disagreeing with virtually all of the administration's policies. Because governing means putting your country before politics. And it keeps the lights on for the American people. We pay far too much in taxes, every American, for the government to not be responsive when they need it the most. And that's what responsible leadership looks like. And I'm sure if we dug into all of the tweets and the statements from all the different shutdown cliffs and crises that we've been in over the years, I mean, we would see all of my colleagues on the other side of the dais swearing up and down how it was the end of the world to shut down the government. But White House switches hands, and then they did what they probably said was the unthinkable, and they shut down the government. But this time, you know, even though we passed the bill in the House, the Senate Democrats refused to act responsibly. They saw an opportunity to score political points and to appease an angry faction within their own ranks. They decided to shut down the government, not out of principle, but to please the loudest voices on the far left. Now, let's be clear. This debate wasn't about spending. This shutdown is not about health care or any legitimate policy disagreement. It was an exercise in power, a stunt to divide and distract and delay. And while they were busy playing politics, it was the American people that paid the price. The hypocrisy has been staggering. We've all seen members of Congress, I've seen some in my own region, standing at a food bank, lamenting that nutritional assistance was lapsing and was interrupted. Then, in the very same press conference, they vowed against ending the shutdown.
Nothing to do.
How can you have it both ways?
You can.
How can you want to be seen as an honest human being where you stomp and you stamp and you have your temper tantrum and you say, my way or the highway. You acknowledge people are suffering and doing without. But then you say you won't vote to make that pain go away. How? If you want to present yourself as an intellectually honest individual, how can you try to have it both ways on this argument? The American people have suffered long enough. You've called it a Republican shutdown. Now you're furious that the shutdown is ending. It's not leadership. It's hypocrisy at its very worst. You're trying to say this is a health care bill about a policy that Chairman Cole has articulated about 19 times tonight is not involved in the funding levels of this government. There is plenty of time for a robust discussion to work together through the natural process where it belongs. Our VA employees have gone without pay. Our border agents, our Coast Guard, they've missed paychecks while still serving this country. Families depending on SNAP and WIC have been left wondering when they'd get food on the table. Air traffic controllers, by God's grace, we had no air disasters during this. A system that is already overstretched, that we are trying to modernize and fix and recruit more of. They've worked without a paycheck, and the American people have fortunately been kept safe. These are the real-world costs of the political games. Real people, not anyone in public office, paid the price. Now, after weeks of pain and posturing, the Senate has finally discovered a breakthrough. But let's be honest, this is the same bipartisan agreement they could have passed 40 days ago, 30 days ago, 20 days ago. This deal could have been on the table any time they were ready to come to that table. But the only thing that changed was political timing. The only thing that changed. And that timing should not be lost on anyone. Anyone watching, any members of the media, as to how all of a sudden we get to this epiphany that now is the time. Because Election Day was a week ago. And some of their colleagues have said the quiet part out loud on TV. And they've said, we couldn't back down before our base turned out in blue states like Virginia, New Jersey, and in New York. And you're watching all of their colleagues get barbecued by that angry mob. But let's also be clear, this was never about health care. This was about another talking point and another distraction. And we can and we will have that full and honest debate about health care during the final appropriations process and throughout the budget year. But this shutdown was about one thing. It was about power. It was about Chuck Schumer and Democratic leaders trying to hold a government hostage for their own ambitions, to satisfy their angry mob that wants them to come back with a pound of flesh from President Trump. If Democrats want to let their angry fringe burn their party down, that's their choice. But we are not going to let them hurt the American people any longer in this process. We are not going to let them hold anyone hostage in the name of political chaos. And I want to thank senators on both sides of the aisle to coming to their senses and working together. And I specifically want to mention Senator Fetterman, who has said from the very beginning that you can support the health care policy efforts that many in this room are talking about tonight. But you could also do what's right and fund the government and take care of the people, which we swore an oath to do. He was the most plainly spoken, honest broker on the Senate side. And that's what courage looks like. So as we take up this measure here in the Rules Committee today and the House tomorrow night, we're doing what should have been done weeks ago. We're restoring order, we're reopening government, and we're putting the country first, because that's what the American people expect and they deserve. To the veterans who have waited for benefits, to the workers who have missed paychecks, to the families who have worried about how to make ends meet, this should have never happened to you. You deserve better from your government, and politics disguised as principle. So today we will act, and tomorrow we will finish the job. We will bring this shutdown to an end once and for all, and we will send a message loud and clear that governing is not performance, it's a responsibility. Because this was never a shutdown of the government, this was a shutdown of common sense. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Langworthy. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez, you're recognized.
Well, thank you so very much, Madam Chair, and it's so good to see everybody. Bienvenidos hace tanto tiempo. It has just been way too long, right? But it's been so long that, following up on my colleague, and I will now say friend, Representative Langworthy's comments about what is this about, let's remember how we got here, because it has really not been that long for the American people, because we were here. Remember, in the middle of the night, just 5 months ago, while Republicans were jamming through a bill that caused a health care crisis. And now we're here because they refuse to solve a major part of that health care crisis, which is those enhanced premium tax credits that are rising, and they're doing it now. The reason we needed to act and act now is because people opened those bills, they opened those notices, and their premiums are going up. I mean, anybody watching, I don't know why people watch Rules, but people do watch Rules. Raise your hand if you are seeing your health care premiums go up. Because everywhere I go, people are seeing their health care premiums go up. And it's not just because they're letting them expire, it's what you did back in the dead of night, where you rushed through. We had to rush to make sure you gave those billionaire tax credits that are permanent. Those are permanent tax credits, which we had to pass before July 4th, but you couldn't bother to extend the tax credits for working families and businesses before the end of December. And you did it all by raising the deficit. Mr. Roy has passed, he's always talking about that darn deficit, $4 trillion. $4 trillion. You raised our, not just our health care costs, or everything, right? Insurance premiums, groceries, utilities, everything's going up. And you know what's interesting? Is that those tax credits that Democrats are fighting for are especially important for folks who live in rural and Republican-held districts. And it's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene's adult kids that will see their health care premiums double. It's across everybody's district. Nearly 6 in 10 marketplace enrollees, people who benefit from these tax credits, live in congressional districts represented by Republicans. Chairman Cole, do you know how many folks in your district will see their premiums?
I think I've been educated about that tonight, actually.
And do you remember what it was?
It was about 48,000.
48,000. But you know what's interesting is your health state's insurance commissioner actually thinks that 100,000 Oklahomans could no longer afford health insurance by the end of the year. I'm sure you know Glenn Mulready.
Oh, Mulready.
Glenn Mulready. You know what he said?
Mulready.
Mulready. So Glenn Mulready, your insurance commissioner, said he tried to talk to his delegation about how it's not a great idea to have these all just disappear, but maybe do it more gradually or do something. He said, I like this quote. He said, they weren't listening at that time, though. Did you talk to the commissioner?
I have not talked to him about this. We actually talk pretty frequently.
Okay,
He calls at least once a year to every member of the
Once a year.
delegation. Again, I know him
once a
quite
year.
well.
What's interesting is right now, we're in this moment where once a year is not enough because those health care premiums are going up. The president of the Oklahoma Hospital Association, he thinks it's even worse when you take into account everything. He said 300,000 Oklahomans will be affected. This is his quote. It's been a long time since we've seen individuals faced with the real challenge of deciding whether or not to take advantage of health insurance for themselves, their families, or go bare. And that's a close quote. And that's the thing about this. These are not just in Democrat districts. And what I love is that we are fighting because we don't care whether you're in a Democrat district or Republican district. What we care about is health insurance. And that's what this fight has proven, is that we care about whether or not you're going to be able to afford your health insurance. And you know what? When Representative Roy was talking about being a cancer
I wish you
survivor.
cared as much about whether or not my people get paid.
Right.
You know, whether or not the people that are working at Tinker Air Force Base,
Mr.
I wish you
Chairman,
cared
I really
about them
respect you,
getting
but I didn't ask you a
paid.
question, Madam
Well,
Chairwoman. I didn't ask
I
you a question.
apologize, but
Thank you.
you
So-
were talking about my district, so
Yeah.
I thought I would
Well,
express myself about my district
yeah.
and
But
what they
we've
think.
We've heard you talk about that before, and I have 30,000 people in New Mexico who are federal employees, and I've been meeting with them as well. But I wanted to go to the fact that, you know, Representative Roy, who came and left so quickly, he was talking about cancer and how he's a cancer survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. And he was talking about how the Affordable Care Act is so bad, but you know what? I'm a cancer survivor. And so if it wouldn't have been for the Affordable Care Act, I would not be able to get insurance because there was a pre-existing condition. You know what else I am? I am a woman. And because I was a woman and could have had babies, I would have also been a pre-existing condition. And these are the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. And the list goes on and on about why that Affordable Care Act makes sense. But what we also need to make it be is affordable. And we had a hearing. I'm the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. Together with members of the Policy and Steering Committee, we had a hearing. Well, Republicans were on vacation. Well, Republicans were gone. If you don't want to call it vacation, let's be honest, you were not here. But we were. And we held a hearing. And one of the most compelling voices, I mean, they were all compelling. We actually had to take out our tissue because we were crying so much. But one of those voices was Brick from Utah. Brick from Utah, who has a condition that he needs infusions. And the only way he can afford those infusions is through because he gets those tax credits. And he said, I want to work. And he went and talked to his representatives, and he tried to meet with his senators. And he did get to talk to Representative Kennedy, and Representative Kennedy's answer to him was, well, just go on disability. That's not an answer. That doesn't save the American government anything at all, because he wants to work. But you know what? We're going to have an amendment from Leader Jeffries and Whip Clark, I see her here, that's going to have a 3-year extension. And I'm supposing you wouldn't support that amendment. Is that right, Mr.
I don't
Chairman
have a
Cole.
vote on that amendment.
Yeah, still having a lot of back and forth here in the House Rules Committee. No headway made yet on a decision about what tomorrow's House floor will look like if this spending bill proposed by the Senate even gets to the House floor tomorrow. So looks like we have a long night ahead of us there at the U.S. Capitol. We're going to take a quick break, though, because we do have some other local and national headlines we want to get to. So stick with us. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back. Julie Kay here. It is just past 8:30 and it looks like the House is still going and things are getting pretty heated. So we're going to get back out to this for just a few more minutes here.
Suffer everywhere to see what's going on with their rising healthcare prices, or their kids that are not going to be able to get the treatment that they need, and that just say, hey, figure it out another way. No, that's not what we're about. And that really is what is so outrageous about the conversation and what is going on. Go ahead.
So, Ranking Member, I think that you're right on point. It's like, we can do this, because we do it all the time. This bill is full of things, and we'll get to that whole idea of the payola for those senators in a moment, right? But I'm also struck by the contrast of priorities. The contrast of priorities. Democrats have been talking about the need to address health care, and it's not just since the shutdown. It was in that big, beautifully bad bill of theirs. Health care was key, and they could fix it now, but it's the priorities. $40 billion, I would think that's what is proposed to be sent down to Argentina.
Yes.
Chairman Cole, is that,
right.
Do you recall that?
No, I don't.
It's $40 billion.
$40 billion.
$40 billion. So that seems to be a priority. They will send $40 billion to Argentina instead of spending $23 billion to provide health care to Americans, and all their
All right, you've been listening in to that House Rules Committee. We've been sticking with us all night because they are working to get to a resolution on this government shutdown. As I mentioned, almost 42 days into this, the Senate has passed a spending agreement, but it has to go through this House Rules Committee before it can go to the House floor for a vote. And as you've been seeing throughout the last couple hours, really no headway made there. So we'll just have to keep an eye on throughout the night. But we do want to get to our other big headline of the day, which is that Charlotte will be the next city where Border Patrol will begin an immigration enforcement operation. So we are very lucky because we have an expert here on WCNC Plus tonight. This is Quentin Williams. Quentin, thank you so much for being here tonight. I want to start with just tell me a little bit about your experience in this field.
I'm a former FBI agent, former federal prosecutor. So I have law enforcement experience, and I work with law enforcement now and have been for the last 20 years, educating them about how to build bridges with the community through our nonprofit dedication to community.
Yeah, absolutely. Really helpful experience to kind of add some insight into this decision. I know we've gotten a lot of questions, so I guess let's just start with, when you heard this news, what does that mean to you? Is this a surprising move from the administration on your end?
Not surprising given what they have been doing in other cities. The issue that I have is that when federal law enforcement comes into town, they are supposed to alert and work with local law enforcement. It makes for a better collaboration with the city. It makes for a safer engagement. And from what I understand, that has not happened.
Yeah, I know in my experience speaking with local government leaders, a lot of them have been opposed to this, not even just Democrats, but Republicans as well. I think people were kind of surprised that this happened now. I know there was kind of a renewed call from some North Carolina U.S. representatives to get some federal support down in Charlotte for crime prevention. But what does that relationship typically look like in your experience between federal officials and city and county government?
Well, the first question is, do you need our help? Because we're here as a supplement. The local law enforcement leaders are really in charge of what happens in their municipalities, in their jurisdictions. So the federal law enforcement agencies would ask, do you need our resources? Do you need our help? And if the answer is yes, then they work out what that help is. But if the answer is no, we got it, we're good, then there's no need to be in that jurisdiction. So I don't think the question has ever been asked of local law enforcement, given the reports that I've read with the sheriff's office and with CMPD. And that's a concerning thing.
Why do you think now? What is the reason, if you had to guess or put this into context, has crime gotten worse in Charlotte, or is it something else that you think made this decision now of all times?
Well, I'm a resident of Charlotte, so I stay on top of the crime stats, and crime has actually decreased in Charlotte. I think both agencies, the CMPD and the sheriff's office, have done a really remarkable job of reducing crime. And then there are a lot of agencies on the outskirts in the area that have also contributed to this decrease, the decline in crime. So I don't think it's that there's an increase in crime. That leaves the question, and it maybe begs the question, is this about something else? Is it about something political, perhaps?
I think what's interesting too is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is the first time that Border Patrol will be leading that immigration enforcement operation without being in conjunction with ICE. So what does that look like with just Border Patrol? Do we know what that looks like? And why do you think that's the way that this is structured?
I think if there is a political issue, I think there's a need for the administration to have certain numbers, and those numbers, as was promised during the campaign, would force the administration to figure out how they were going to get to those numbers. I don't know that using ICE alone could get them to those numbers. They would have to have supplemental resources. And I think that's why Border Patrol was brought in, to supplement the resources of ICE and to give them a hand. And now they are leading the charge in some cities. Charlotte would be the first, I believe, to be led. The operation would be led by Border Patrol instead of ICE.
With that in mind, I'm sure this being the first operation of this structure, it might take a bit of time to put into effect. We do not have a timeline from DHS on when anyone will be here, how soon this could get put into place. Do you have any idea on how long, in your experience, something like this would take to be implemented?
Well, we haven't had any confirmation that it's going to happen. From the administration, at least. We do know they're in Chicago, and I've read the reports that when they're done in Chicago, they're going to be coming to Charlotte. The operation would begin immediately because once they hit the ground, they hit the ground running, and I'm sure they would have information that would lead them to some of the folks they're looking to deport. And that's concerning because they would come in right away, and we would see a change in the dynamic, both in the uptown area and in the suburban areas of Charlotte.
Is that where you anticipate, if this is to happen, that those operations would be focused more in uptown and also the suburban areas?
I would expect that. Because if they're looking to get to the most populated areas where there's a condensed population, it's going to be in uptown and the suburbs, directly abutting the uptown area.
You mentioned, of course, that this has been kind of done in an unusual way. Of course, Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office released a statement saying we haven't received any information or inquiry from the federal administration saying that they're going to do this and requesting, if that is to happen, please communicate with us directly. And so on top of it being done in an unusual way, North Carolina is kind of in an interesting place politically, being a state with, a very red legislature and a blue governor. Do you think that that's one of the reasons, Charlotte may be in a political position, if that is the motivation behind this?
Oh, Charlotte's very blue, so that could be one of the underlying reasons if it's political. And I just looking at all the other places where they're doing this, that seems to be the pattern. Chicago, of course, is another one. Very blue city. Illinois is a very blue state, but Chicago in particular is extremely liberal. So that leads us to believe that there might be something other than just getting the numbers. It's where they get the numbers. And there are other places that they could go where there is more violent crime, an increase in crime. Charlotte's not that place.
Is there anything that you think we haven't talked about that you think is important, or just in general misconceptions that you think needs to be cleared up?
The greatest issue that I see arising is there are conflicts between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement, and in particular, ICE, and now Border Patrol, and even the FBI, because the FBI has been assisting with these immigration issues. There's a conflict between the two, and that conflict is raising inconsistencies across the nation. There are some local jurisdictions where the police are assisting, and maybe there's better communication with the federal law enforcement officers carrying out these duties. And then there are some jurisdictions where law enforcement is doing everything that it legally needs to do, but it's not necessarily assisting over and above what is legal, the minimal legal requirements. And the communities suffer as a result because they don't know what to expect. They are kind of caught between is a local police officer going to, deport me, or are they not doing that kind of work? And I think that's an issue that's going to have ramifications across our nation. It's not just a local or isolated event. It's affecting other states. And so that's my greatest concern.
I know that we're going to have a lot more questions in the coming days. Hopefully we get some more information about if this is happening, the timeline. But thank you for walking us through just kind of what this might look like as people are beginning to speculate. Quentin, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, as I said, hopefully we get some more information on timeline if Border Patrol is to come to Charlotte. We just got this confirmed via NBC earlier today that this is a discussion. Charlotte is expected to be the next city where they will conduct an immigration enforcement operation, this one being the first city where Border Patrol will lead that operation without ICE. So more information hopefully to come in the next couple days. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Live Impact News. Just a little less than 15 minutes that we still have you here. We're going to be here until 9, and we are going to take you back to the House Rules Committee because they are still talking and discussing what tomorrow is likely going to look like on the House floor as they trying to reach a decision on the spending bill to end the government shutdown. But looks like they're going to be here for quite a while longer to find a solution.
This language was not shared with the House representatives prior to it being put in the bill. And I personally agree that it should be removed. The problem is if we remove it, the Senate, it has to go back to the Senate. And then you're right back to where you were 40 days ago, where all of a sudden you're trying to get a piece of legislation out of the Senate. And so, I mean, I've struggled. I want you to know that, Mr. Cole. I want the American citizen. I've struggled with what the right course of action here is because what they did is wrong. This should not be in this piece of legislation. And they can say it's about good governance all they want to. When they made it retroactive, then all of a sudden it was no longer about good governance. There's actually a list of people that know they will get paid as soon as this thing is signed. At least they've got the coupon where all they have to do is go file at the courthouse and get paid. And I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do. My gut is, because of the way this place is so dysfunctional now, that the right thing to do is to get the government cut on as soon as possible and make sure that the American citizens are watching what those senators do and hold them to account for what they did. And at the same time, the House put legislation out that actually reverses what the Senate has done. They should vote on this in the light of day. If they think this is the right thing to do, then they should have a committee meeting and a straight up or down vote on it. Don't hold my people who work in my district at Robbins Air Force Base paycheck any longer than it's already been held. And so I want you to know, Mr. Cole, you're our chair. I respect you tremendously, as much as I respect anybody in this House, and as much, I mean, I can take everybody I ever met. I have tremendous respect for you. You are a man of integrity and honesty, and when you tell me you didn't know, I trust you. And when Mike Johnson, when I'm asking questions about it at 9 o'clock last night, I don't think our side knows. I do think I think the Dems and the Republicans in the Senate knew, though. I do. I want you to know that. And, but this is, I mean, American citizens just need to read it, and they can figure it out for themselves. It's not that hard. It's big letters. It starts on 217. It ends on 228. It won't take you 10 minutes to read it, and you really can pretty much start where the private cause of action is discussed. But that would never pass if that was a standalone piece of legislation. And it is clearly authorizing an Appropriations Act.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to yield to
Yeah,
Mr. Roy.
I just want to add that I share the concerns of the gentleman from Georgia. I do not think that this provision should have been inserted. It certainly shouldn't have been inserted at the 11th hour without deliberation and back and forth. I do believe that the gentleman was correct. There were Democrats and Republicans involved with it. But I think there's going to be a lot of people, if they look and understand this, are going to see it as self-serving, self-dealing kind of stuff, and I don't think that's right. And I understand that I think some of the motivations were to try to target a DOJ that I think was fairly obviously abusing its authority and targeting United States senators, separation of powers concerns, all the things. We can debate all that, but we think it was pretty egregious, so I have no problem with the prospect of going after and trying to empower, even through private right of action, a way to go, because we do it in other contexts, consent decrees and other things, but the retroactive, potential to have dollars going to United States senators, when we've got American citizens, whether it was J6ers, whether it was people from the FACE Act, whether it was others that have also had the full force of the federal government through the Department of Justice targeting and coming down on them, and they're going to see, oh, but you can slide in a provision in here for United States senators? Like, it is beside my comprehension that this got put in the bill. And it's why people have such a low opinion of this town. I am torn also, the gentleman from Georgia, because we need to fund the government and we need to get this passed. And I'm trying to figure out what we can do to force the Senate's hand to say you're going to repeal this provision and fix it without amending it here to then delay the funding of government, which we want to proceed to go move forward with. But that provision needs to get fixed. And we need to find a way as a body to get it fixed as soon as possible. And I'm continuing explore the options tonight. I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
Mr.
Thank you.
Scott,
And
would you yield?
I just want to point out it's $500,000, and the way it's written, it is a minimum of $500,000. It is per line. It is, and Ms. Ledger Hernandez, I'll give you 60 seconds, but I think it's time to move on. I just don't.
I truly appreciate your very careful consideration and review for the American people of this. As you know, I do have an amendment to strike the whole thing, and I think it would send a great message if you would actually say, I'm going to vote for this amendment.
And this is why I didn't want to get into this debate. The problem is, if we could take it out and send it to the Senate and know that the gamesmanship wasn't going to be played over there and the government would get cut back on, I'd be glad to. But the bottom line is, if we amend this bill with anything at all, we risk extending the shutdown, air traffic controllers not being paid, law enforcement not being paid, our staffs here not being paid. And that's a risk that I don't trust.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't trust just the Democrats. I don't trust the system to work where we could fix it with what probably a supermajority of this committee thinks should be done and not delay the government coming back on. And with
So
that,
the other, I would only point out that it's not, if you would,
He'll give you 60
I just wanted to finish. Will you give me 15 seconds?
yes.
So it says each violation, and so the violation isn't just each telephone, it's each time it's requested. So it could multiply much higher than that, because it's by violation.
That is
Yeah.
my read as well.
Yeah, we agree on that.
Madam Chair?
I yield.
Madam Chair? I just want to state for the record, it's another reason why the House and the Senate should be in session during a shutdown. Maybe this could have been avoided.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Griffith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, am very concerned about those sections. I will tell you, I've already made the decision that I will vote for this bill and not vote for any amendments because the shutdown needs to end. It's been going on too long. Too many of my people are hurting, and we got to get it done. There's some other issues in here, not as egregious, but at least it was done in the light of day with a vote. But the hemp issues, that was a fight between gentlemen in the Senate from Kentucky, both of them fighting each other. I don't agree with the solution they came up with, but I'm voting for it because I've got too many people that need the government to open. And therefore, notwithstanding, we're going to hear some great amendments, I'm sure, but I'm not voting for any of them because we need to get this thing done, and then we can start negotiating on other things. Now, Mr. Cole, Mr. Chairman, you've said this a couple times. I want to underline it because it's exciting for me to hear it coming from the Appropriations Chair. Because one of the things as now a longtime member of the Energy and Commerce Committee that drives us crazy is that people want to airdrop. This didn't just happen. This happens when we're here in session. It didn't happen because people weren't here. It happens all the time between the House and the Senate on bills that come out of appropriations. And you haven't done it, to the best of my knowledge, but they create programs that are never authorized by the authorizing committees. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to the premium enhanced tax credits or the enhanced premium tax credits, that's the jurisdiction of Energy and Commerce, Ways and Means, and Ed and Workforce. They overlap. Different pieces of it belong to each of those. And of course, the bill that they keep talking about, that they claim took all this money away, that came out of the Budget Committee. That didn't come out of appropriations either, the reconciliation bill. And I just appreciate that you're recognizing that's not the proper jurisdiction. And before we had the shutdown, I wrote a whole column on how we could reach some kind of an agreement on a glide path. But I also pointed out in several, and I've had several columns where I've talked about
All right,
this.
you've been listening into that House Rules Committee. We've been checking in on it basically all night, and they're going to continue into the evening working to find some kind of resolution here so that it can get to the House floor tomorrow so that they can come to a conclusion on the government shutdown. Senate has already passed a spending bill. The House has to decide it, and tonight this House Rules Committee really is the final step to get it to that vote, hopefully tomorrow, to see some kind of resolution here and end the government shutdown. But as you've been seeing, lots of disagreement on both sides. Unclear if they're going to come to a consensus tonight. We're going to have updates tonight, of course, on our newscast at 11. But that is all the time we have for now in the Live Impact studio. We'll see you back in the studio at 11.